Hi, welcome to Intro to Soc. Today we're going to be covering the topics of culture and socialization. I think this one should be fairly interesting but straightforward. Okay, so here's our agenda for this time. Talk a little bit about culture, talk about how culture is maintained, how do we use symbols to communicate, what is socialization, what's the purpose of socialization, what does the process do, and how are we socialized, and by who? So first, what is culture? It can be a little bit complicated. Our definition of culture has changed over time. So for earlier thinkers like Durkheim, culture could basically be reduced down to two forms. So first is primitive, or it could be civilized. And typically the way that we decide between the two is the presence or advancement of technology. So contemporary sociologists argue that since nearly all cultures have engaged in war and most have accepted technology to varying degrees, culture must be a little bit more complicated than what Durkheim initially defined it. So what's the difference between society and culture? We often use the two terms as interchangeable, but they are different. So this can also be a little bit complicated, but also kind of subtle. So first, society. Society is the actual group of interconnected individuals and the relations between them, which we've been talking about kind of over the last few weeks. Culture is kind of what I consider to be the glue that holds these people together. So culture is going to be the shared beliefs, practices, morals, and values that keep members of a society together. So that's the things that we believe in, the things that we like, the things that we think have some sort of importance or value. So we decide in our culture that it's appropriate to dress every day, right? We decide that communication can come through the form of a text message. It can be something along the lines of language. So it's not the people, but the things that we do, or the things that we consume, or the things that we believe. So think of culture like this. It's kind of like a toolbox. It's a toolbox that gives us knowledge and skills that we need to belong in society without violating its norms and rules. So it's basically the things that we need to know so that we don't stick out like a sore thumb, so that we're not rude, so that we can get jobs, so that we can be in school, so that we can get friends. So culture might tell us how to work, what jobs are considered actual jobs. It might tell us how to dress. Again, we decide every day to get up and get dressed in our culture, how we talk. So that can come in the form of text messages. It can be our language. Culture can tell us how to eat properly. So we're not, eating spaghetti with our hands, right? We use silverware, forks, knives. Can tell us how to shop. We talked about this last time when we talked about the social construction of reality. In our culture, it's totally normal to use a credit card to do exchanges, right? Whereas in other cultures, you could maybe exchange a piece of clothing for a goat. So we acquire cultural knowledge through learning. So it's not just something we come out of the womb knowing. We don't necessarily know how to belong. It is not innate. It has to be taught and has to be learned. So knowing how to abide by these cultural norms is really important so that we're able, again, to belong, whether that's we have friends, we know how to get a job, we know how to behave in school. So there are some cultural universals. So despite a lot of the huge differences that we have culturally, there are some things that virtually all human societies share in common. So these things are marriage, art, sport, dance, commerce, so commerce meaning the way that we pay, the way that we exchange, and language. Even though they look a little bit different between cultures, we all have some variants of this, even though it might be a little different. So it's just kind of interesting to see how complicated culture is. Sometimes we tend to think that we're just totally different. We have nothing in common, but there are some features that are universal. So how does culture work? How does it keep us together? How does it act as a glue? So it provides us with a sense of shared values and norms that tell us how to think and behave appropriately. Keep the difference between these two terms in mind. First, we're going to talk about values, then we're going to talk about norms. So values are kind of abstract ideals of virtue. So it's not necessarily a specific action. It's something kind of abstract like frugality, hard work, privacy. So it's not necessarily something that's super tangible, but these are abstract ideals of virtue. These are the things that we find important, that we believe in. Norms are going to be more concrete. So they're going to be the principles or rules of social life. So that could be hygiene, fashion, dressing at all, the way that we dine, right? So those are a little bit more tangible and easy to see. But both of these values and norms keep us together by ensuring that we're all kind of on the same page, right? About what's appropriate, what's okay behavior, what's not okay. And that's a big thing that keeps us all together. Now, there's two types of norms. So the first is going to be mores. Mores are widely observed and have great moral significance, and breaking them has extreme consequences. So these are going to be the behaviors that break the law, right? I'm showing a picture here of Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was a serial killer. We don't approve of murder, right? We don't approve of murder. And as we saw through his subsequent sentencing, I believe he got the death penalty. That's really serious, right? So the consequences are extreme. We find murder to be on the most kind of extreme end of things we don't do that are not acceptable. Then you have folkways, and folkways are basically norms that are involved with routine or casual interactions. So if you break a folkway, people might give you like a dirty look. They may not like it, but you're not going to be in the back of a cop car. So a folkway could be, after you're done with a job interview, shake that interviewer's hand. It could be just being polite to wait staff, right? So that's going to be a difference. So the mores are kind of more, if you violate it, it's going to be an extreme punishment. Folkways, you might just get some dirty looks. So what happens when we disagree? So this is all jolly, right? We always just get along all the time. If we all just agree on the cultural norms and values, we'll all be fine. As we can see every day, all the time, this doesn't always happen. So despite these cultural rules per se, conflict among groups and individuals is totally inevitable, right? So not everybody's going to agree on the same norms. Not everybody's going to agree on the same values. So cultural conflict often can result in frustration and isolation. I think that we're kind of seeing that a lot. So you can imagine if you are a person who's new to the States, you're trying to learn all these things, and they might be very different from what you're used to. That can be really challenging. So just because we talk about culture being the glue doesn't mean that it's always effective, nor does it mean that it doesn't change, right? So these things are gonna kind of might change over time. So the culture that your grandparents were familiar with might be very different than the one that you're living right now. So disagreement and conflict is totally normal and it is inevitable, but there are ways to deal with it. And we'll kind of talk about that later on in the class. So, hey, don't judge, right? So human beings, we always want to make sense of things and to create order out of chaos. That's what it comes down to, right? We have culture, we have these ideas, values, and beliefs that we just agree are true. We talked about this during the social construction of reality when we talked about common sense. We have these things because if we didn't, it would be constant chaos, right? Because nobody could agree. Everybody would be fighting all the time. And it can often make us uncomfortable to be approached with customs, practices, and traditions that we don't understand because we feel a little bit out of place, right? We feel like a fish out of water. One term that we use to describe this is ethnocentrism, right? In our attempt to understand the actions and beliefs of others and to figure out our place in our given society, we do try to make sense of what they're doing and saying according to our own perceptions of what's normal, moral, valuable, and true. Can you see a problem with this? So it's basically judging another person's actions, beliefs, behaviors based on our own perceptions and our own experiences. We might run into trouble, right? Sometimes they're going to do things a little bit differently, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong. It's just different. So keep that term ethnocentrism in your mind, and we'll talk a little bit about it more as we get into race and ethnicity. So here's a good example, right? So living with your parents. Think about some of the reasons young people might live with their parents. I'll give you just a second to do that. It's becoming really common now. Though the perception of returning to your parents' home is becoming more accepted and even necessary, young adults in the US still receive some harsh judgment for living with their parents. So some people might say, oh, that person's just lazy. It's because they made bad financial choices. They decided on the wrong college degree. They should have gone to college and didn't, right? So there's lots of different excuses. And they're a lot of times laced with blame, right? So how might your experiences with harsh judgment and American influence the initial assumptions that you might make about why your newly married coworker who just moved from overseas still lived with his parents until he was 35? So again, we're trying to think about this person from our own experiences, our own perceptions, thinking from our own culture, where it's still becoming a little more acceptable, but not quite there to continue living with your parents, right? It might be a little bit easy to start judging them and to say, like, why would you do that? Maybe you made bad choices. Maybe you're just lazy. Like, why would you ever live with your parents when you have a spouse? Or why didn't you just move out and be on your own before you got married, right? So all these questions kind of start to come up because it's just a little different. So let's talk about culture and perspective. One of my favorite ways to talk about culture and how it applies in daily life is to talk about bathroom etiquette. So, what are some cultural norms that we in the US have about sharing a public bathroom with other people? So, for example, how close is too close? Is it appropriate to make eye contact with the guy in the urinal down from you? How do we dispose of toilet paper? So I want you to kind of think about all of these norms that we have regarding bathroom etiquette. And then I want you to think about, how does it feel when someone violates these norms? It can be unnerving, maybe a little gross, confusing. So a lot of these emotions are going to come up because we're confronted with something we're not used to, right? So can you think of any other norms that we have in public spaces? So think about places like movie theaters, restaurants, schools. So what are some normal behaviors that we have put in place to decide, if you abide by these norms, these values, then you're acceptable, right? You're not bothering me, you don't stick out. So what are some of those things in some of those places? So I want you to just think about that before you move on to the next slide. So switching gears a little bit, so we've got a picture of Clueless here, the movie on the left-hand side of the page. I love Clueless. Let's talk about material culture. So material culture consists of the physical things that we create that influence how we live and interact with each other. So again, this is material items. They're things that we want, that we have, that we make. So that's homes, TVs, electronics, clothing, phone, cars. So the thing about material culture is that the things that we create, like these things I just said, can say something about our cultural values and norms. So when we put up fences at homes, what does that suggest? It means that we like privacy. If we have cars, it means that we like efficiency. If we create clothing, it means we enjoy modesty, right? We don't want to be nude all the time. So when you think about all the things that we value, that we create, think about why we value them and why we created them, and kind of what do those things say about us as a society, say about our culture. So symbolic interactionism is a facet of sociology. I don't expect you to know the term super well, but it is kind of an interesting perspective. So such symbolic interactionism is one of the four main theoretical perspectives that we use. You don't need to know the other three. Kind of going back to when we talked about the social construction of reality, we've got our little Lego construction worker here. We're master builders, right? Something comes from something. Something never comes from nothing. So together we assign everyday things and conversations some sort of meaning. We communicate with each other by responding to shared symbols and meanings. So it gives us a way to basically communicate with each other without even talking, right? So when somebody likes something on your page, they liked it, right? They don't have to comment and say, oh, this is so awesome, I really liked it. They can just show you a symbol. We use stoplights every day. Again, what would we do? Nobody could agree that green means go and red means stop. We've all kind of agreed upon it. We don't have to have a conversation with the person in the car next to us. Trophies, that's how we demonstrate that somebody is a winner. We use emojis, right, to demonstrate how we're feeling without actually having to say it in a lot of detail. So these are the ways that we use symbols. So essentially a symbol is anything that carries a particular meaning that's recognized by people who share a culture, right? So you've got a no smoking sign or symbol here. We've got a stop sign or symbol here. We use symbols as a way to communicate with one another by creating and expressing our shared cultural meaning. So that can apply to logos, right? We got Instagram logo here, social causes. We got the symbol for recycling, instructions. You don't have to go and dig out your restriction manual to know that you need to push this particular button to get power on your computer, right? And then values. So you'll see around Manhattan, lots of people have K-State flags. That means that we value K-State. We value the athletic and education programs. So one of the most crucial aspects of culture is language, right? Language is something that's found in every society, even though it's always different. It's the primary symbol that we use in society to communicate with each other, right? We're generally talking to somebody every day. Again, whether that's a verbal conversation, nonverbal, we're typically using language. It provides us with shared meaning and organization in our complicated social world. So it helps us kind of make sense of things. We're able to talk, we're able to converse, we're able to understand. Language is a way that culture is transmitted and ensures the survival of society. So if tomorrow we all just woke up, none of us knew the same language, how quickly would we fall apart? I think it would be pretty quick. So language is going to be basically the cornerstone of culture, any society. So switching gears here a little bit, what is socialization? And you'll see why socialization and culture go hand in hand. Remember culture? Hope so. We just talked about it. Culture, again, is a shared beliefs, practices, morals, norms, and values that keep members of a society together. Again, society is people, culture is the glue. So again, that's language, that's symbols, that's clothing, jobs. And socialization, you can kind of think it as a vehicle through which culture is transmitted from one person to another. So this is done by our parents, it's done by schools, it's done by the government. So basically culture is able to shape who you become, the values and norms that you accept through the process of socialization. We can't, again, we don't just come out of the womb knowing things, right? Somebody has to teach us. And the process of being taught is called socialization. So why does it matter? So essentially the purpose of socialization is to reproduce society, right? We don't want society to fall apart. So, you know, with every baby that's born, they learn the rules of our society and of our culture. If we had nobody to teach that person, it would all fall apart. So social reproduction is the process through which the agreed upon norms, values, and ideals of a society are maintained through transmission from one generation to another. So essentially, socialization is important because it teaches us what we need to know to belong and to be accepted in a general society. Again, thinking back to the sociological imagination, it helps us go from I to we, right? Nobody wants to be an island. If you're an island, you're going to have a really hard time in society, right? Because everybody wants to grow up and have a job, to have friends, to have a family. To achieve goals, to travel, to be able to know how to do that. So in order to do that, we need people to teach us, and that's done through socialization. So how does this happen? Again, I've said it several times. We don't come out of the womb knowing these things. We have to be taught. We have to learn how to act, to communicate appropriately. And we can't learn everything that we need to know about belonging to a society or to a culture from one person or place, right? So agents of socialization are the people, groups, and places that teach us how to belong. And there's going to be four main agents, though there's a lot more. So the four main ones I want you to focus on are going to be family, schools, media, and peers. So there are a couple different phases of socialization. There's two, and everybody goes through them no matter what, right? So we got primary socialization. This always happens within the home with whatever family is raising you. So kids are going to learn basic language and behavioral patterns associated with cultural norms, ideas, and values. This is where we learn to talk, right? We learn to talk from our parents. We learn how to eat from them. We learn how to do hygiene, shower ourselves, bathe ourselves. So it's kind of like all those basic things that you need to know to, you know, be a person. You learn from that primary socialization group, which is going to be the family or whichever home that you live in, right, as a young person. Eventually we'll hit secondary socialization, and these are going to be the agents that exist outside of your primary home. So teens and adults learn how to fit in with specific groups and try to shape their own individual identities. This again can be peer groups, schools, you know, the government, once you start being exposed to mass media. So I want you to think about this, just kind of on your own. So were there any behaviors, attitudes, or values that you were socialized to do or to accept at home by your parents or by immediate family that you changed your mind about as you began to associate with others outside of the home? So was there anything that you learned from your family that now that you're a little older, you're kind of like, you know, I might go a different way? And then I want you to think about why that is. So who kind of changed your mind on that? College is a really big place for that to happen, right? It might be the first time you've not been in your parents' home, might be the first time you've ever met somebody who's from California, right? So you're starting to be exposed to new people, places, thoughts, opinions, and ideas. So again, looking at primary socialization, we've got the family, right? The family shapes kids' early ideas about hygiene, manners, how to, you know, show respect to an authority figure, how to dress, how to clothe yourself, how to talk, how to use language. Schools are also one of the first contacts that we make outside of our home. So this is going to be the first secondary socialization, typically. Parents often choose schools according to their school's alignment and beliefs, values, and attitudes with their own. So, some of you who come from religious homes might have gone to religious-based schools, right? Some of you who came from relatively secular homes just went to public school. So it's very common that parents will try to seek out a school that kind of aligns with their own values and beliefs. Of course, we know that that's not accessible for everyone. Private schools can be extremely expensive, which we'll talk about later on. But in school, we learn about, authority. That's where you start having an authority that's not a family member, right? You start to, oh, that's my principal, that's my teacher, I need to respect them. You learn about professionalism, like here's how you dress for a presentation, here's how you give a book report. Health and hygiene. It can be kind of a rude awakening in junior high where you start to smell yourself, right? So sometimes teachers, gym teachers, athletic coaches will have to kind of, nudge you in that direction. And achievement, it's where you learn how to get from one grade to another, how to get from, first grade all the way up to graduation. It's where you start learning, here's how I get to where I need to be. Of course, the peer group is going to be really influential. People are often socialized by members of their age grade or the group of people that's surrounding them who are approximately their age and kind of share similar experiences. So if you're on TikTok or something, you might hear a lot of talk about generations and generational differences. So, Gen Z is experiencing this, the millennials are experiencing this, Gen Alpha is experiencing something a little different, Gen X, the boomers, right? So as people age, the peer group becomes increasingly influential, especially for teens seeking identity. I'm sure that you all can remember how nice that was to be able to talk to somebody who wasn't your family, right? So you start to desire friends, you want a peer group, you want to find out who you are outside of your family. So the peer group can also teach people how to dress. This is what's trendy, this is what's cool. Teach you how to communicate. Like, oh, I don't want to call you on the phone, let's just text. How you spend your time. So, my peer group might say, oh, like, let's go to the game on Saturday, for example. While other peer groups might be like, hey, like, let's go get coffee on Saturday morning. So they're teaching you how to spend your time, how to communicate with them, how to dress in a way that's cool or trendy. They can teach you how to celebrate, right? So a lot of people, their first drink of alcohol is going to be with a peer group, right? Some people that's their family, but I wouldn't say for most. So you learn how to celebrate, this is cool, this is what you do, this is how you get excited for things. Next, we've got mass media. So that includes a lot of things, right? That can be social media like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, newspapers, journals, magazines, radio, television, movies, videos, video games, right? So everything can kind of be encompassed into mass media. Mass media mediates or delivers to us the messages of broader society and is instrumental in how we perceive and interpret the world. So through media consumption, we might learn, what's trendy. So you got a girl here wearing like cool jeans and a shirt. What's valuable? So we know with the age of social media, people place a lot of value in how many followers somebody has. What matters? Oftentimes the media tells us, you need a fancy car, you need a lot of money, you need this pet, you need to have this kind of relationship. And it also can tell you who matters, right? So for example, right now, Taylor Swift matters. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, right? So it's teaching us what's cool, what's valuable, what should matter to us, what's important, who should matter to us, who we should listen to. And you can imagine this is kind of for better or for worse, right? So sometimes the media portrays things in ways that we don't really like, or they draw attention away from things that we should be paying attention to. So keep in mind that the mass media has a really large impact on socialization as well. So switching gears a little bit here, let's talk about social roles. Social roles are the behaviors that we're expected to adhere to based on our position in society. So over here, I've got an illustration of somebody who's in medicine, right? So from somebody who's in medicine, we expect them to be smart, right? That would be great. Expect them to be relatively intelligent. We expect them to be able to communicate well and to teach us what's going on with our body. We expect them to be healthy, right? And we expect them to care a lot. Are all those things always true of every medical professional? No, but it just kind of gives us a blueprint for what we think we can expect, right? So through socialization, we learn about our own social roles. So for you, that might be a student, it might be a leader, it might be, you might be a sibling, you're somebody's child, right? So it's what expected of us and about the social roles of others and what to expect of them. So again, at the end of the day, remember that we like things to make sense. We like to have a sense of order. We don't like chaos. So understanding our roles and the roles of others is one way that we try to make sense of the world. So if we kind of have a general idea of what we can expect from somebody based on what we know about their position in society, that helps us kind of figure out how to interact with them a little better. So what do you think? What are some roles that you inhabit or associate yourself with? So again, this can be if you're a student, a leader on campus. It can be down to if you identify as a man or woman, as gender non-binary. Do you identify yourself as an athlete? So think about some of the roles that you inhabit or that you believe you possess. And next, I want you to think about what are some expectations that you perceive others in society as having of you based on these roles. So what do they expect from you as a student? What do they expect from you as a brother or sister? What do they expect from you as a man? What do they expect from you as a construction worker, right? So what do people tend to identify as qualities associated with your social position and social role? Next, let's just kind of close out thinking about this, right? So we've talked about culture, we've talked about socialization. So now I want you to think about your future career. So what are some ways that maybe making assumptions about how other people perceive themselves, their needs, and their capabilities can cause problems in your working relationship with them? So depending on your job, you might be working with students, you might be working with patients, you might be working with clients. So why do you think it's important that we kind of try to do our best to suspend assumptions, to kind of be culturally aware, culturally sensitive in our careers? So that is all that I have for this chapter. Be sure to answer the discussion board and complete the quiz. Have a great day.